Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another ETS2 storytelling episode, where I will share with you an eerie and suspenseful story called The Midnight Ferry. If you will enjoy the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe with the bell on so you don't miss any future videos. So, let's get started. Every trucker has their preferred routes. Some like the smooth, endless stretches of highway. Others crave the challenge of mountain passes. Me? I've always loved the ferry crossings. There's something calming about rolling onto a ship, shutting off the engine, and letting the sea do the hard work. But one trip, one strange ferry crossing, left me questioning everything I thought I knew about the road and the sea. It started like any other job. I was hauling a load of luxury cars from Calais, France, to Newcastle, England. A straightforward gig, well-paying, and simple. The cars were tightly secured in an enclosed trailer, their glossy exteriors gleaming under the depot's lights as they were loaded up. The only unusual thing was the timing. My client insisted the cars be in Newcastle by sunrise, no exceptions. That meant catching the last ferry out of Calais, a midnight departure. I arrived at the port with time to spare. The air was damp, the smell of salt and seaweed hanging heavy. A few other trucks lined up ahead of me, their drivers leaning against their rigs, chatting or sipping coffee. The ticket office glowed faintly through the mist, and beyond it, the ferry waited. A hulking silhouette against the dark water, its lights casting ghostly reflections on the waves. As I approached the ferry, something felt off. The ship looked older than I expected, its paint peeling and rails rusted. The name painted on the side, Nautica Nocturna, was unfamiliar, and I'd made this crossing dozens of times. Still, I figured it must be an alternate vessel, brought in to handle the late-night traffic. The boarding process was uneventful. A gruff attendant waved me forward, barely glancing at my ticket. I rolled into the lower deck, parking the truck in a designated bay alongside a handful of other vehicles. The space was dimly lit, the fluorescent lights flickering as I turned off the engine and stepped out. I grabbed my overnight bag, planning to head up to the lounge for a coffee and maybe some shut-eye. The ferry horn blared, a deep, mournful sound that echoed through the metal walls, and the ship began to move. That's when things started to get strange. As I climbed the stairs to the passenger deck, I noticed how empty the ship felt. Aside from a few drivers I'd seen earlier, there was no one else. No passengers, no crew. The lounge was eerily quiet, the vending machines humming softly in the corner. I poured myself a cup of coffee from a self-serve station, the machine sputtering as if it hadn't been used in years. I found a seat near the window, staring out at the dark sea. The horizon was invisible, the water blending into the sky, both as black as ink. The ferry cut through the waves, its engines a low rumble beneath my feet. I tried to relax, telling myself it was just a routine crossing. But the silence was unnerving, broken only by the occasional creak of the ship's hull. An hour passed, maybe two. The coffee had gone cold, and I was fighting to keep my eyes open when I heard it. A faint noise, like footsteps, coming from the deck above. At first, I thought it was another driver, someone stretching their legs or exploring the ship. But the sound didn't stop. It grew louder, more deliberate, like someone pacing back and forth. Curiosity got the better of me. I stood up, leaving my bag behind, and followed the sound up another flight of stairs. The upper deck was even darker, the lights dim and flickering. The air was colder too, carrying a strange metallic tang. I called out, "Hello? Someone there?" But my voice seemed to vanish into the shadows. The footsteps stopped. I froze, my heart pounding. For a moment, all I could hear was the distant crash of waves against the hull. Then, from the far end of the deck, a figure emerged. A man in an old-fashioned sailor's uniform. His clothes were soaked, water dripping onto the floor as he walked toward me. "Lost?" he asked, his voice raspy and hollow. I stammered something about hearing noises and just wanting to stretch my legs. The man tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Best to stay with your truck." Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. I stood there for a long moment, trying to process what had just happened. Something about him didn't feel right. His voice, his wet clothes, the way he seemed to vanish so easily. but I shook it off and headed back to the lounge, telling myself it was just a weird encounter with a crew member. When I returned to my seat, my bag was gone. The coffee cup I'd left on the table was shattered on the floor, its contents seeping into the carpet. My skin prickled, a wave of unease washing over me. I searched the lounge, but it was empty. The other drivers I'd seen earlier were nowhere to be found. I decided to head back to the truck, feeling safer in the cab than anywhere else. The lower deck was just as I'd left it, the vehicles lined up in neat rows. I climbed into the truck, locked the doors, and turned on the interior light. The familiar surroundings of my cab were comforting, but the strange events lingered in my mind. That's when I noticed the time. According to the dashboard clock, it was 4 a.m. The ferry ride should have taken just over 3 hours, and we should have docked by now. When I looked out the window, all I saw was open water. No shoreline, no port, just endless black waves stretching in every direction. Panic began to set in. I tried the CB radio, calling out to anyone who might be listening. "This is Blue Horizon, stuck on a ferry out of Calais. Can anyone hear me?" Static filled the speaker. I switched channels, tried again, but there was no response. The ferry horn blared again, louder this time, shaking the entire truck. I glanced at the other vehicles, hoping to see another driver, but their cabs were empty. It was as if I was the only one left on the ship. The hours dragged on. The sea never changed, and the ferry kept moving, its destination a mystery. I must have dozed off at some point because when I woke up, the truck was shaking, the sound of heavy chains echoed through the deck, and I realized the ferry was docking. I looked out the window, expecting to see Newcastle, but what I saw instead was an unfamiliar port, shrouded in mist. The docks were old, crumbling, and overgrown with weeds. A single lamp flickered at the end of the pier, casting an eerie glow. A loud knock startled me. I turned to see the same sailor from before, standing outside the cab. He gestured for me to lower the window. "You've arrived," he said, his voice as hollow as before. "Unload and leave quickly." I didn't argue. I drove off the ferry, the tires crunching on the uneven cobblestones. As I unhooked the trailer, I noticed the sailor standing by the ship, watching me. When I climbed back into the truck and turned to thank him, he was gone. I never figured out where that port was or how I got back to Newcastle. By the time I reached the city, the sun was rising, and it was as if the entire trip had been a dream. But I know one thing for sure: I'll never board the Nautica Nocturna again.
Thanks for watching. I hope you have enjoyed, and if that's so, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe with the bell on so you don't miss any future videos.
Also, consider to become a member of this channel. Join now to get access to perks and all the benefits that level provides. Thank you and see you in the next one. Bye-bye.